What's good, y'all? This is John from the One Carolina Show. Hey, while I'm kind of testing out some new software, not using the typical thing that I would be using. So let me know if you guys can hear me in the chat. Type a one in the chat if y'all can hear me, man. I want to make sure that y'all can hear me because if I know if you can hear me, then you'll be able to hear everything else. As soon as I get the indicator, the one that I'm being heard, man, we rolling. I ain't taking no time. We ain't wasting no time. Conseco, hey man, look, if you can hear me, Spence, you might have to send me on Twitter. Like I tried to add you, I tried to give you a wrench, but for some reason, okay, cool. I'm glad y'all can hear me. For some reason, Spence, for whatever reason, I could not add you to the admin, man. So we got to change that. So yeah, definitely shoot me your information on Twitter and let's get that done, bro. But anyway, man, I appreciate y'all joining me on this Tuesday afternoon, man, reacting to this press conference. I gotta be honest with y'all, man. I'm excited. I mean, it's kind of, I guess we already kind of know what the deal is. So, I'm just gonna kind of give my live reaction about, what I saw and some things that I think about it, and we'll chat. So appreciate y'all stopping by, man. Shout out to my man Anthony Rockhead. What's going on? DB, what's up? Got my man Josh in here. WC Griffin, man. I appreciate y'all stopping by. Make sure to hit that like button, man, so we can get the algorithm popping, get some more people in this chat. But without further ado, let's get to it. All right. Also, type a one and let me know if y'all can hear
the
audio
all right
from this as well.
Yeah. Way to start it off. Just want to say, this is an exciting time for the organization. To have the number one pick is a big thing. But I do think it's about the whole weekend. It's about, all the picks throughout this draft. It's about the college free agency. This is just a great time for our team to get better. But it is fun to have the number one pick. Obviously on TV a lot. There's a lot of talk about it. But guys have done a ton of work on it, and we're prepared. I do want to thank, David and Nicole for all the resources they gave us, the spring. It took a lot to go out to all these pro days back to back to back. So, they really supported us, and, really thank them for that.
Real quick, let me stop for a second. One, I want to make sure y'all can hear that audio. So, like I said, tap a one in the chat if you can hear that audio and it's coming through full. This is kind of like I'm trying, like, if you notice, the format of my show is completely different than before. One, because I'm trying to have a better live experience. That's one. Two, this is, obviously I want to kind of create a platform to be able to have guests and things like that on to make sure that, I have an aesthetically pleasing, something that you guys would like to look at, watch, and see. And so, we'll be beta testing a lot of different stuff, but I really like the direction that the show is going to go from this point forward. But like I said, okay, I just want to make sure y'all can hear it, everything. So that's cool. Bet. Let's get going.
Frank and I, they've given us the authority to make the decision. I just want to thank them for that. So, and with that, I do want to, acknowledge the scouts. A lot of times they get overlooked. They, they do all the work during the season. We're out, taking care of the team during the season. Free agency, these guys are on the road, away from their family. So I appreciate them. Really appreciate Cole Spencer. We trust We trust him to run the college side. He's done.
I'm not sure why, oddly enough, this would be happening right now. Why there would be, my internet's working perfectly. Let me see if we can go back to where we were.
From their family. So I appreciate them. Really appreciate Cole Spencer. We trust him to run the college side. He's done a great job for us, and
there we go.
Really appreciate your work there. So with that, I'm excited for the weekend coming up. I think we're ready, and college scouts are in town. We're finishing up the board. we'll meet with the coaches this week, and then it's draft week. So with that, I'll open up to questions.
So do you know who you're going to take, or when did you settle on it if you did?
No, you know what? We're still going through the process. You know, obviously through this whole since February, the combine, and everything else, there's been some clarity. But we've made a conscious effort to keep an open mind about this, be continuous.
I don't believe none of that. I don't believe that for a second. I believe 100% they know who the decision has been made. We have talked about this multiple times. This decision has been 100% made. Smoke screen. Tis the season.
Process. We have the last kind of group in today. We have the coaches, you know, Wednesday and Thursday of this week, and at that point, we'll get together and kind of make that decision. But we've got some clarity through this process.
With that said, Scott, we saw yesterday that Bryce canceled his last visits.
Yeah.
Has there been communication to him that he's the pick?
No, there is not. And, you know,
all right,
I'm
going to stop right there.
On his own, and
I don't believe that. I was listening to Mike Florio and Chris Sims say this earlier. You don't cancel pre-draft visits, regardless of who the teams are, regardless of where they're picking. You don't cancel those visits unless you know that you are the guy. Somebody in that building has called and told him, hey, man, you're it. And it would be hard for me not to believe that it wasn't Scott that done that, or at least Frank or somebody. Somebody has said this to him. Now, I know that many people would be like, nah, man, like, we don't know yet. Man, we know, man. Let's stop. Let's stop it. We know.
I just refer you to, you know, his reps and to Bryce as to why.
You guys took a big group to those pro days. Can you kind of walk us through how that decision-making process is going to go? Like, you guys taking a vote, yay or nay, whittling down? How is that going to work?
No, you know, this is a collaborative process, and it's not just, you know, Frank and myself making this decision. You know, we want to involve Thomas Brown. We want to involve Josh. We want to involve, you know, Parks Frazier and Jim Caldwell. We have a lot of great minds in this organization. And, you know, we'd be remiss not to use those, you know, all those voices. There's a lot of football knowledge. So we've included all of the coaches, all of our personnel staff, just to make the most informed decision.
Scott, you talked about, you know, you definitely want to get a quarterback, and there's 4 guys you're looking at. Have you trimmed that number down from 4 at all? Or
no, again, that's part of that continuous process. We are consciously trying to, you know, keep all 4 in there so we can ask every question, look at it from every angle to make sure we're making the right decision.
Now, I'll say this real quick, because this was a question that was asked on the Ultimate Panther Creator podcast that I done with the guys over at PNP. And shout out to them for hosting that, because it was a blast. If you hadn't watched that, hadn't had a chance to see it, go back and check that out on the Panther Nation podcast. But Dave had asked a question, and I, you know, obviously kind of tongue in cheek, you know, they asked me, like, you know, they asked everybody, and I said Bryce, and Bryce, you know, just kind of being, you know, funny, even though that's my true feeling. But what I will say is that I'm interested to find out. Maybe this comes out after the fact. I don't think, then again, I'm not sure, because I don't know that they would even let us, you know, have this information to know. Like, I remember when Matt Rule done the draft, I guess whatever Camp Confidential or something like that, it was before the draft. And I can remember there was a moment where Matt was like looking at the whiteboard, kind of going through his rankings, you know, of where he had every single player ranked or whatever like that. So that does make me wonder if they'll show where they have these quarterbacks ranked. But I would like to see that. I'll be honest. Like, I'd like to see it just to be, you know, like, okay, if Bryce wasn't an option, where else would you have gone? Like, what else would you have done? That would be very interesting to see. Let's keep going.
It's a big decision for the organization. We don't want to lock on to something early on just to you know, decide that's our guy. We want to keep this process open all the way through.
Scott, how much has your perspective changed on each guy as you've gone from, say, the combine through the visits to
Yeah, I think we've learned a lot about him. You know, we knew a lot about him on tape. We We knew a lot about him through our scouts and through third-party sources. This spring, whether it's an all-star game or combine or having dinner with them or having them in the building, you learn something new about a guy every time you sit with them. You want to see how consistent are they, how do they change, how do they evolve through the process. And there's a lot of good things to learn from this, and that's why we'll just take every opportunity we can to get to know these guys.
From a scouting perspective, when you guys are looking at a guy, we hear the term outlier a lot with scouting, just publicly. When you're scouting a guy who maybe has an unusual size or an unusual speed, height, balance, how much does that play into the way you evaluate a player?
Yeah, I mean, it's all a piece of the puzzle, right? It's not the end-all, be-all. It's just something you take into account with all the other attributes that the player has. But no, it's not one. It's not a disqualifier or anything like that.
Is it an added discussion, though?
Yeah, I mean, we discuss everything about the player, so it's not just size. It's not just arm strength or accuracy. We talk about.
No, I know that. Uncle Quan, you mentioned that was after the draft, whenever they had done the or showed that video. No, I know. But they showed that board. They were doing that process in the pre-draft process. So that's what I was saying. Like, I don't know that they would do that at quarterback, because I don't think that they would want any of these guys to be like, to feel weird about like where they had each of them ranked. Like, that's something I don't know that they'll reveal to us publicly, but like, it would be interesting to see what they believe, like where they believe that they would be.
About it all, but it's a small piece of the puzzle.
Scott, when you make a move of that nature, a lot of times it's for somebody in particular. How different is it kind of having to maybe go through the process a little bit more in that fact and have more options on the table?
Well, we felt strongly about a group of guys up there, and we knew this is something we wanted to do. We wanted to be aggressive and go up and do this. I think through this process, we made the right decision. I feel really good about going from 9 to 1. I'd hate to be at 9 right now trying to figure this out. So I know we made the right decision.
I can't blame them there. At 9, this would have been a really, really tough situation. Really tough situation. Like, I can't imagine. Like, when you see the hype built around these guys right now, like, can you imagine trying to figure out a situation at number 9? Like, everybody keeps saying AR. Oh, we didn't have to move up for AR. I don't know about that. Colts, Seahawks, it's very possible that either one of these teams could grab that guy. Will Levis, I'm starting to see, is starting to rise up the draft board per the betting odds. So it's just, you just don't know. I'm glad we made the move. I'll say that.
To go up there, we're going through the right process of being thorough, checking every box that we can, and the next step is going to be execution on draft day and giving these guys the resources they need beyond that to be successful. But when we made the move, we did feel strongly that there would be a guy there that we wanted.
Scott, and actually for all three of you guys, there's a lot that's been made, obviously, Bryce Young's height, and you just went through a season where you had a quarterback who struggled throwing it over the line of scrimmage and getting balls batted down.
Yeah.
Is that any reservation at all for you guys, and if not, why?
Well, I would say this. When Russell Wilson came out, I think he had 3 balls batted down his senior year. Bryce had 2. So if you're talking just about Bryce, this doesn't seem to be an issue.
I am so glad he just said that. Let me tell you why. Because we look at often, and this is fair, I don't want to discount anybody's opinion on this specific point. Like, when we saw Baker Mayfield, saw that happening to Baker Mayfield a lot last year, that was something that a lot of people were concerned about with Bryce coming in. The thing is, though, is that if you go watch P.J. Walker, that to me was a better representation of a short quarterback playing behind this offensive line. Why? P.J. was much deeper in his drop. I think they'll play more play action with Bryce Young. They kind of have to. I was talking the other day on that panel, and I mentioned where from 2009 to I think 2022 last year, right? There was a graph that was done of the percentage of snaps that were taken in shotgun. In 2009, it was like 35% or something like that. Last year, it was 66. It was 66% last year and the year before that. And if I'm not mistaken, there was a team, it might have been Philly, that 70% of their snaps were in shotgun. So I mean, that's just kind of where the NFL is going. But even if he was under center, like there's going to be times that you see Bryce under center. We saw Bryce under center very minimally, but there was a couple of times that he was like that at Alabama. The thing is, though, is like finding throwing lanes, your drop, how long you take to develop throws, the decision making. I went back and I watched Baker. Someone did a film study on Baker versus, man, who was it? Maybe Detroit. I'm not sure if he played in the Detroit game, but I think it might have been Baker versus Detroit. And when you watch the times that Baker would have the ball batted, it was versus Arizona. Whenever Baker would have the ball batted at the line of scrimmage, I'm not saying that this was all the time, but at least I'd say 40, 50% of the time, it was because of decision making. It was because he was hesitating, because he was pump faking or holding the ball, not necessarily even pump faking, but just kind of holding the ball for a second longer than he should and not delivering because he didn't know where he was going pre-snap. Now, what I will say with that is this: that can be a direct correlation. And I got to be honest, because I heard this a lot. To me, that's a direct correlation to that sham of a quarterback competition that they had during camp and him just having to develop time with these receivers. I'm not giving Baker a pass, but I'm just saying, because you can't give PJ a pass. But PJ was in this offense longer than he was. PJ had a chance to study much longer than he did, even with there being a new offensive coordinator the next year, right? But he still had Sean Ryan as a quarterback coach. So there was a development arc that was there for PJ that Baker didn't necessarily have the opportunity to have. Again, I'm not giving Baker a pass, but what I'm saying is that if we're comparing Baker's height and that being the reason behind why the balls are bad at the line of scrimmage, that might be one part of it, but it's not like height doesn't extremely affect that, I guess is what I'm saying. And the point was just made. Russell Wilson had He's had 3 batted balls, coming out of Wisconsin. Bryce at Alabama had 2. So I've never been worried about that. That's been the least of my concerns when it comes to Bryce Young. Let's keep going. Man, they sure did have a lot of lag.
When you grow up, a shorter quarterback, you learn how to, evolve your game and adapt and see the field. And he's done that, just like CJ's, evolved his game. Will's evolved his game. They all develop, and there's certain tools that they have, and they learn to play to their strength, and they've all done that.
Yeah, to me, it's a lot more. It's not about so much the height. You got to have those pocket instincts, your ability to slide.
Let me do something real quick. JSU, I'm gonna highlight your comment because I couldn't agree with you more. JSU says, hang on, adjust this a little bit so we can see it better. JSU says, when I say I prefer Stroud, doesn't mean I don't like Bryce if we take him. I don't talk down on what we need. I do not like AR and Will Levis. That's fair. I think, it's crazy just how, collectively we were angry and we're going at Matt Rule. Everybody was, right? And then now it's like, all right, now that Rule's out of the way, it's almost like Panther Twitter, Panther Nation in general, always has to find a reason to fight against each other about something. And I get it. We all have preferences, but some people just go to an extreme. I'm like, that's why I said, man, I ain't talking down on CJ. I don't know CJ well enough as a person to talk down on him like that. Not even as a player. And let me tell you why I say that. Because I have a bias towards Bryce only because of what I've seen already, what I've seen on film. But I'm not going to act like a guy like CJ couldn't develop. I don't think they're taking him, because if they do, this would be the biggest smoke screen of all smoke screens. But I will say that I agree with you, man. I prefer Bryce. But if it's Stroud, all right, cool. If it was Levis, I think I'm in the same boat with y'all. But if it was AR, yeah, maybe. But I think this is a foregone conclusion at this point. But let's keep going.
I'd find passing lanes. So you got to look at other things like that, and then obviously how smart and how well a quarterback sees the field is also important. So you got to take more than the size into account.
Scott, in terms of, obviously it's a team collaboration, the scouts and Dan and Frank and everyone else. But at the end of the day, if there is a disagreement on one quarterback or the other, is it you have the final say, so you have the final pick?
No, I look at it as Frank and I will make that decision. I don't anticipate that at all. You know, I haven't yet asked him yet, but we were laughing the other day because it's becoming clear for us, you know, maybe a certain way that we want to go, or, you know, who it may be. But I don't anticipate it being an issue.
Scott, you
Following
traded
up
up
on
to
the
one.
size is and I heard you all addressing the height. What about Bryce's weight? I mean, there's a lot of people that think he's going to play at 195. Is that a concern for durability and longevity?
Yeah, I think, you know, nutritionally we can do some things to educate him. You know, we get him in the weight room. You can see when you really look at his lower body has gotten bigger. You know.
I saw this on Twitter. Shout out to my boy Aaron Duncan from Unnecessary Bluntness, pointed this out. When they start talking about this was the moment. I think if there was any moment in this press conference that they confirmed that it was Bryce, it was like, all right, now I know somebody could probably look at it and be like, man, come on, bro. Like, that's not necessarily what they mean. It's hard for me not to see that. It's very hard for me not to see that that's when they started talking this kind of talk, having this kind of dialogue about, you know, nutrition and all this other kind of stuff. Like, yeah, this has all been weighed out. Done deal.
He's put on a lot of mass down there. A lot of times quarterbacks don't want to lift upper body because you get a little bit bound up. But there's some things he's going to naturally put on size as he ages as well. You know, again, going back to Russ, I think he came out at, you know, 200, maybe he might have been 206 pounds. He's at 220 now. I mean, guys just grow. That's something he can control, and that's something we can help him with. We can't control the height.
Scott, can you talk about the impact that Josh McCown has had throughout this process and some of the insight he's been able to provide?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's a guy that's played the position. He sees it through the lens of a quarterback, just like Frank has. And you know, he's a really smart guy. He understands every aspect of that position, how to you know, just basically how to prepare for games, how to study, and he'll have that impact on whichever quarterback it may be. Frank can have that impact. You know, Thomas Brown, even though he didn't play the position, he can help them understand the offense. There's this whole entire staff is unique because it's all geared to like help a quarterback evolve and develop.
Absolutely. And I got to tell you this, not that I would flip-flop on a position, but I will say this, man, when you look at this staff in particular, like I heard someone say this the other day, I can't remember who it was, but they said that they believe that this may be the best staff, best put together staff in NFL history. When you look at all the experience, there is no place where I feel like a rookie quarterback would thrive more than here. And this is another reason why I'm so big on Young. If you see what he's already doing cerebrally from the perspective of being able to pick up, you know, offense like from Bill O'Brien or something like, you know what I'm saying? Like the things that he's able to do cerebrally already is only going to improve that much more when he's around these guys, when they can teach him small tendencies, things, how to position your feet, things like that. Like he is going to get a wealth of knowledge and be able to solve so many problems. I mean, that's essentially what you're hiring this guy to do, solve high level problems for you. And it's going to be awesome to watch. It's going to be amazing to watch. Not for nothing though, it would be interesting to see if they could do the same thing for a guy like Anthony Richardson. You know, I don't know how much different of an effect it would have him here versus with someone like Shane Steichen or, you know, any of these other offensive gurus out here, but it would be interesting to see how he would fare here as well. Not that I want that, but I'm just saying, be interesting.
How did you learn about Bryce that you didn't know about going into this process?
Really just how genuine he is. You know, you see it from outside and just how much he loves ball. The guy's got a lot of fire inside, even though he's on the outside, he looks like he's right here. He's a fiery competitor, and that's what you love about him.
Scott, you obviously trade up to the first overall pick to grab a quarterback. You sign Andy Dalton. You have a new coaching staff who didn't draft Matt Corral. I'm just curious, what's the message to him as all this is going on?
He's come in, he's ready to compete. He's 220 pounds. Looks like a different guy when he showed up. He's in great shape.
Talking about Matt Corral.
Great spirits. I haven't talked to him directly about anything that's going on right now. I did talk to his agent. his agent relayed, he's ready. He's ready to compete and come in here. There's nothing promised to anyone. You get what you earn.
Scott, in your career, how much have you relied on, or how much?
I should have put up this poll already, and I'll do this on the community page, but I wanted you guys' response to this. What is your belief? Okay, I'll just ask a question. Do you think that Matt Corral gets traded? And 2, if he does, will it be during the draft or right before? Because I believe it's going to happen. I would like to see him here, but I don't know. I just got this weird feeling, and it ain't got nothing to do with no jersey number. To be honest with you, I don't know if this has already happened, but there's there's a pretty high probability that Matt Corral, regardless of who we drafted, was going to move to 2, because that was his college number, that was his high school number, I believe. So, it was only right for him after DJ left for him to move to number 2. So it ain't got nothing to do with the jersey. It's got more to do with the opportunity. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of feel bad for Corral because I was thinking about this earlier today. It's I saw comments, early on, especially once he got hurt. I can't remember. I had someone on my show. I don't remember who it was. It might have been you, Elliot. I see you in the chat. But one of you guys were talking to me about how you felt so bad for Corral because he had one opportunity. And that's true. He really did. He only had really one true opportunity, and it was blown because of injury. Now, if they keep him, I think that'll be different. But if they don't here, and I can't say this for the rest of his career, but at least for Carolina, it's man, you get that shot, you get drafted, you get hurt. And I mean, he would have had it last year. He would have had as much time to play as anybody else with how everything fell. But it would be interesting to see if they trade him. I believe that they will. I don't know what they'll get for him, but I believe it. Yeah, I agree. Gone because he wants a real opportunity. Personally, I haven't heard anyone explain the offense that we will be running once I do not feel better about the quarterback. Okay, so I think that a lot of the offense that you will see from us next year will likely be a lot of mesh concepts, air raid. I think it's going to look very similar to the Philly offense, honestly. If we're going RPO, it's going to look extremely similar. The only difference I think that you'll get from Philly's offense to ours is depending on who's our slot guy. You're going to see it. Well, really, it could be the X as well. You'll see a lot more over the middle. If it's Bryce, you'll see a ton of plays over the middle, especially on 3rd and short situations and stuff like that where they decide not to run the ball. But I think when they brought in Miles Sanders, they were kind of telling us, I think the Miles Sanders acquisition, I said this, the Miles Sanders acquisition was them telling us 2 things. 1, that they were bringing in Bryce Young. 2, that they're going to plan to go RPO, just like Frank Reich said. And the reason I say that is because of this. When you get rid of Deontay Foreman, he would be lined up 3-4 yards in the backfield. They hand the ball off to him. He's a downhill runner, find the gap and explode through it. He's not really the versatile back that can kind of dump off into the flat and stuff like that and catch passes. That was really what C-Mac was great at. But they brought in the closest iteration to that because you will be spending most of your time in shotgun. And Foreman's he's not going to work like that. It's just not the same he's not the same kind of player that will work that way. Plus, he's a volume runner. The more touches you give him, the more production he has. That's not going to be the case with Miles Sanders, in my opinion. I think that Miles Sanders having 1,000 yards, if it's 1,000 yards is the stat, it'll be all purpose. I don't see him having 1,000 yards rushing necessarily. You would hope that, obviously, but it's going to be kind of a running back by committee situation because you still got Chuba Hubbard, and they're going to do everything they can to operate within space. So like I said, I think it'll be a mix of air raid. I think you'll definitely have a lot of mesh concepts because of work in the middle of the field. You maybe even see a little West Coast because Bryce processes so quickly. I would think that if they were going to bring in someone like CJ, then you would probably go more, I guess a similar offense to what you saw with Ben McAdoo, but I just don't see that being the case.
Stats you've been relied on tests like the S2 test. What can you glean from that?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to quarterback.
Well, obviously we use it so we believe in it, but it's a tool. Just like there's a lot of different tools that we look at, analytics, everything else. It all comes back to the tape is the most important thing that we do, what we watch and we evaluate, and what Cole watches and what Dan watches. S2 is just another tool that we use. It is something we believe in, though.
In terms of scouting these, how do you wait until they're eligible before you really start doing in-depth scouting, or were you doing some of that last year with Bryce and CJ, like when Bryce was winning the Heisman Trophy and all that when he still wasn't eligible? How far back do you go to start doing in-depth scouting?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as they're in the lineup as a starter, we start evaluating them. We've seen these guys multiple times throughout these past few years, whether it's practice exposure, going into the school, talking to the staffs at the school, strength staff, coaches, trainers, and then see them at the live game exposure, and then through the combine and the pro day process. So, we've seen these guys a lot throughout their careers.
For all three of you, can you go back through the process, a moment kind of behind the scenes thing that sort of jumped out to you? And each of you probably have a kind of a memory through the visits and the pro days, and with the quarterback specifically.
With all the quarterbacks, I think it's just really nice, like going through the process. You have an idea. You think you have an idea of what these guys are like. You know what they are as football players, but then to actually sit with them and talk to them and get to know them, get to know about their families, the way they grew up. I think that's pretty cool. Just kind of getting to know these guys on an individual level.
Shout out to Thunder Dan Morgan. But man, I saw something. Let me highlight this comment by my man Riz B. Riz B said, "I would have been here sooner, but I got stuck watching the Bryce interview on the Pivot podcast. It was fire. Yes, it was. I watched the one from CJ last year with Bijan Robinson. As a matter of fact, I borrowed a clip from that podcast for one of my videos about CJ a little while back, and just talking about how, Bryce kind of highlighted the same thing, and you probably remember seeing this. So they were talking about, Channon asked the question. He was saying, like, man, you getting ready to come into a ton of money. I know you did an NIL deal or whatever like that, but like, man, 70 million, 25 million guaranteed, like, coming first overall, like, man, like, how you going to handle that? And he was like, man, he said a generic answer, I think, nothing to change or whatever like that. He like, yeah, but I hear you saying that, but like, what about the girls and the cars and all that kind of stuff? And he was like, well, I done all that. You know what I'm saying? Not necessarily from the girls or the cars perspective, but for him, it was shoes. Same thing for me, man. Like, I got to be honest with you. Like, I don't know how many of y'all out there are shoe heads, man, but I'm an absolute sneaker freak. And I try not to be a hype beast, man. Like, I ain't the dude that's like, if you ask me like, yo, what's the top 5 Jordans, man, that that you've owned or like that you like, I ain't gonna tell you like, the SB Dunk 4s that just came out or something like that. Like, I ain't gonna go with the latest trend. I guess, I'm not really big on what a hype beast is, but I guess if that was, from what I understand, that's what it would be. For me, it would be like, like obviously Concord, stuff like that. Obviously there's a certain pair of Yeezy, Desert Rats, things like that I like or whatever. But for the most part, like he said, shoes. With him, he loved the shoes, probably a few other things. He talked about how the NIL money helped, change his family situation or whatever like that. But both of these dudes are kind of rooted, especially Bryce, because Bryce's family, like, they don't come from like huge money or nothing crazy like that. But it's not like a situation where, they like struggling by any means. I think his dad's like a pretty successful, like, entrepreneur in his own right, like a motivational speaker, psychologist or something like that, to that degree, which kind of explains when you see like the S2 score and how that whole thing panned out. But like, I don't think this is going to be a situation where he's going to come into the league and just start going crazy because he got all this bread now. And it's like, man, I can go out and buy this car. I can go on this vacation. All of these kind of girls are attracted to me and stuff like that. Because honestly, it used to be, and I could say, when you play ball where he plays ball and the tradition of greatness that comes from Alabama, then I can see where you can get thrown off before NIL was a thing. But I think you're going to start seeing less and less of these, especially the top guys, because not everybody is getting the same kind of NIL money. But a lot of these top dudes, man, that are able to sustain themselves while they're in these programs now with because the NIL deals, man, are crazy. Like, some of these guys get $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, dollar deals or whatever. And that's a lot for a college kid. You know what I'm saying? So if they're able to handle it at that level, because once you get to it, like my uncle always told me this, man, I always talk about my uncle. pretty successful business guy, entrepreneur, all this kind of stuff. And like, he would always tell me, and it would never really register me when I was younger. And then it started hitting me a little bit better as I got older. He'd be like, John, man, when you get to a certain level of money, it's like, there's a certain level you reach of money where like more money is not really that big of a difference. Like your lifestyle doesn't change that much. Like, sure, you can buy some more toys and, all that kind of stuff like that. And you can help a lot more people. Like you can be more effective, but the influence is going to be far better than the actual dollar amount. And I was like, man, that's a bar. So like, yeah, I think this dude going to be straight when it comes to that. But that Pivot podcast was incredible. I agree.
On a personal level. So, I think for us that's the biggest thing going through this process is, just kind of getting to know these guys, digging down deep into who they are as people. And, I think that's the main thing going on the road.
Is there one little moment with each one of them that points out that sort of jumps off the plate that you go back and say that was pretty cool?
I don't think so. I don't think there's any one moment. I think we just try to spend as much time with these guys as possible, get to know them, and, it helps us make the best decision as an organization.
Scott, I wanted to ask you first and then Dan and Nicole as well. Bringing a dozen guys on the road for a week and a half. I mean, we talked about it in Tuscaloosa. Like, how fun was that? How unique was that?
Well, I think it was really important in the bonding of our staff. It's a new staff, and they all came from different areas. And not only were we out there trying to find a quarterback, we had the downtime to sit there and spend with each other. And, getting to know Frank away from the building, getting to know Josh and Jim Caldwell away from the building is awesome. It's a great experience. It's one that, I think moving forward, if we have that ability to do it, I think there's a really positive aspect.
Underrated part of this show. This will probably be clipped down to become my short for the rest of the week. The cultivating of relationships. I think too many times in life we take for granted just how important it is to cultivate relationships. I would personally take relationships over money because I can grow my net worth through my network. So I would much rather have the relationships than the money essentially. Why? The money's always going to come, just based on who you're around. One of the things I talked about that I was so focused on intently was like, hey, we got to have a situation where these guys are unilaterally on the same page. They may not agree. Like, okay, you and I may not agree. That's why I think Jay Issue's comment was so important. You and I may be vehemently on the opposite side of each other when it comes to what we believe who we believe this quarterback should be. You hardcore CJ, my boy DB goes super hard for AR-15. You know what I'm saying? Like you cannot shake him off of AR-15. But at the end of the day, when we pick the guy, when the decision is made, the guy that writes the checks ultimately is going, gets to make this decision, even though he's kind of quote unquote staying out of the way. The guy that writes the checks is making the decision. Can you live with it? That's why it's important for us to be able to cultivate these relationships outside the building so that when we make this decision, there's a unilateral approach to how we develop this guy. Because if it's not, it's going to be a nightmare. It'll be another situation like with RG3. Because one thing, this is a quarterback heavy draft. There's quarterbacks everywhere in this draft. There's a guy somewhere like Tanner McKee. He's not talked about. But a lot of these guys, if they fall into the right situation, could become the Brock Purdy of this coming year. So we don't know what this looks like. Max Duggan. Who knows? Could he have a Dak Prescott kind of, rise where he goes to a situation where somebody gets hurt? Stetson Bennett. He might not get drafted. I think Stetson won't get drafted because of his off the field stuff, not necessarily because of his play on the field. So this is I guess if you want to call it heavier quarterback draft. What I wouldn't want to see is a situation like this. We draft Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, whomever, AR, and then 3 or 4 rounds later, we draft another quarterback. I don't think that'll happen because I think our approach, our staff, the camaraderie is much different than Washington was back when RG3 was drafted. But we've seen it before. RG3 drafted, Kirk Cousins drafted in the 3rd or 4th round. You know what I'm saying? Because the coach didn't want him. And that's what I think is important. There's got to be a unilateral approach to this. So it is important to build those relationships. And you can tell that these guys really rock with each other, man. Like when they at the pro days and stuff like that, like they are there together. You spend a lot of time around people jet setting from place to place to place, looking at these quarterbacks, bringing these guys in, having meetings with them and stuff like that. So there's something to be said for that. But yeah, relationships, super important.
To going on the road together and just spending time away from the facility, getting to know them as people. How do you think? Talking ball, talking family, all those things are really important.
Could you follow up on the question about the S2 and how we've seen that really grow in popularity, and specifically how it helps evaluate quarterbacks?
It helps as a comparative tool, but like everything else, it's just a piece of the puzzle. It's not the end-all, be-all. It's just another piece of information for us to look at and kind of compare guys
S2.
and see where their strong and weak points are.
Is it more beneficial in terms of quarterbacks than the Wonderlic?
I think there's some correlation with certain positions more than others.
I'd say middle linebacker. Interesting point. So let's talk about that for a second, because you know I got to shoot CJ some bail here. I done a video where I talked about CJ's character. Mike Lombardi had came out and said, CJ's a hard guy to coach. I heard this quote somewhere. I said this on the panel live the other day. I don't know where I heard this. I can't quite remember. But someone said that, and I'm pretty sure it was Josh McCown, and I watched the Underdog Fantasy video of CJ Stroud's film scheme. And I remember real quick, let me just say this. 60 people watching right now, 20 likes. Hit that like button if you don't mind for me. I appreciate it. That's the only thing I ask. I don't want any money. I don't care about anything else. I just want you to hit the like button. Let's just have a conversation. But anyway, I was watching a video where Josh McCown was saying something about you got to make him believe you. And every time I heard that, I was just like, what does he mean by that? Like, you have to make him believe you. So I started thinking about it. I was like, you know what? Maybe that's a, I guess, filter that he has that protects him from, I guess, like BS, if you will. Like, I got to believe you because I'm not going to allow anybody to tell me anything different about the skill level that I'm at, right? And if that was the case, I would understand it. That's fair. That's an extremely fair point. I'm not going to allow you to BS me into a situation that I know could be detrimental for my development, if you will, right? Or is that this? Because this is what I thought about as well. Does that comment mean, okay, I may not be somebody that you can BS. Does that comment mean that I'm not going to listen to something that you say because I know better than you yourself may know? Because if that's the case, then yes, that is a problem. But like I said, that's not a universal opinion on CJ. Not at all. So I don't even know where that comes from. I'm a Bryce guy. Look, through and through. Y'all know me. But like, I don't like when stuff like this comes out because like I said, you can tank a guy's draft stock. You talking about the difference of millions of dollars from doing stuff like this, man, from coming out and saying these kind of stuff, just so that you can get a scoop or be like the clickable guy or whatever like that. Like, it's not cool. But if it's true, if it is true, then it'll eventually come out. Cream always rises to the top. What don't come out in the wash will come out in the rinse. So we'll see it eventually. I just don't believe it. I have a very hard time believing it.
As you mentioned clarity about the number one pick, compared to years past, have you spent more time or less time on the first pick compared to all the other stuff throughout the weekend because of the benefit of having the number one pick?
Well, that's a really good question because I think you want to have some balance. Obviously, it's a huge decision for the organization. So, the evaluation portion of it, a lot of that was done prior to this. We've gone back just to rewatch, refresh. But I think the more time than any other position or any other pick has been about the number one pick. How do we break down the person? We spend more time sitting with them, trying to get to understand them. Is this the person that can lead our franchise? Is he the one that really kind of validates why we went up to one? Is he the one that's going to make the difference? And it's not like we're expecting this quarterback to come in instantly just like make everything happen. Everything changes immediately. I mean, you've seen it with like Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. It takes time, and you have to surround them with the right people, and you have to surround them with the right coaching. But I think we've done that, and we're not going to force this quarterback on the field. We're not going to ask them to do anything they can't do. We're going to ask them just to play their game and deliver the ball, make the right reads, and make the right decisions. And that's so for that reason, we have spent time doing that on that number one spot.
I want to highlight something real quick. Couple of so Brandon Coffin. I'm gonna highlight this comment. I used to think like that too. I don't anymore. Having a lack of trust in people is a fallacy, because if you hang around the people that you're supposed to be around, then you can trust them. Let me give you an example. I can't tell you where the water treatment plant is in my neighborhood, but I trust that when I take a shower, it doesn't have arsenic in it, and I'm not going to die from ingesting it, right? I don't know where my next meal was prepared before I bought it from the store, but I trust that they're doing the best that they can, or at least trying to be as forthright as possible to make the food edible for me so I can eat it. And with CJ being something like, let me tell you why I know that CJ is a person who does trust. Listen who he talks about leads his life. That's why I told you, I don't believe the situation that they're saying about him being uncoachable. I don't. When you listen to a guy that is as vehement about his faith, you know how much the Bible tells us faith comes by hearing, and hearing comes by, so like my thing is like you're trusting and believing in something that you don't see for yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like that we all believe, right? That I believe, that many of you believe. Yeah. Like that's why I never bought this idea that he has this, oh, I got to believe you kind of, mentality or attitude. I don't. Now, if you want to say that he's the guy that doesn't, believe that you can, just say anything to get over on him, I think Bryce would fall into that category as well. I think many of us would, but when it comes to like the just overall trusting, to get to where this guy has gotten to in his life, you have to trust people. You got to. I trust that my computer is not going to melt down right now and I'm going to be able to talk to you guys on live, So not picking on you or anything like that, but I'm just saying like the trust situation, I don't always buy that, but I'm glad you said that. Thank you for bringing it up. Now I saw this comment too, and I got to respond to this. Jeffrey Havercross says, been a fan since 1995. Last couple of years been bad drafting. Young is just a joke. What we have to go to number one. Young is just a joke. What we gave to go to number one. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Did you watch any of Bryce Young's tape? Have you watched? You don't even have to watch tape, because here's the one thing I know. I'm not a scout. I am not a scout at all. But I heard Bryce Young say this on his pivot interview when he was talking about CJ. Ironically, he said that watching tape, watching film versus watching it on TV, or even all 22 for that matter, night and day from a sideline perspective, because you're watching what the interactions are like when they go on the sideline. You're watching how they prepare for the next drive, all these different kind of things. I don't think that you can watch the tape and walk away and not say that this guy is probably one of the better prospects that we have prospected and looked at since Cam Newton. Honestly, I could say that I can make an argument that coming out of college, he projects to be a better pocket passer than Cam became, right? Many of you will probably throw tomatoes up, say I'm crazy. Take the emotion out of it. I'm just going off of the prospecting, not what they become. If you want to say that the height and the size is the argument, I get it. But when you turn on the tape and you look at the tape, like my man Blunt Sports says, trust the tape. There's no way you would have that tape. Just my opinion. Let's keep going.
Obviously an exciting time for the franchise and fans as well. You talked about coming up with the draft board. I'm curious, for each of you guys, what does the next week look like for you all, schedule-wise?
So the scouts just came back in town the other day. We're just reviewing the board, going back through our spring process, who tested well, who didn't. We gather more information on these guys after the combine as well. So we're just going position by position and going through those guys. We're meeting with the coaches later this week and getting their input. But all the work has basically been done. There'll be some minor tweaks to the draft board at this point. Right now we're about 170 guys. We whittled that down from, we probably wrote up over 1,300 guys this fall. So so we're down to 170, and we're just tweaking the draft board and just tightening everything up and getting ready to go for the draft. But I feel prepared. Our process has been a good one. I'm ready to go.
You got 5 other picks besides this number 1. I mean,
Yeah.
what other areas do you feel like need to be addressed position-wise?
Yeah, I think you always need a pass rusher. I mean, we could beef up the offensive line. We've done a lot of things at receiver, but you can always add a receiver. Linebacker. I mean, no team's ever complete, and you can always add whoever. But we're gonna the whole part of like free agency is for us. This is our philosophy and it has been, is to go into the draft to be able to pick the best player available, and so we've done that. When it comes down to best player available, and there's 2 guys at certain positions, and one's
real quick. Shout out to Donnie Lynn for that super chat. We appreciate that. Let's keep going.
position is a need, say it's a linebacker, then the need is a linebacker. So going into it, we're aware of where our weaknesses are, and we'd like to address that, but we're not going to force it.
You're 9 weeks out. I'm sorry, not 9 weeks. 9 days out from the draft. So everybody's looking for Easter eggs, trying to figure out what's going on, who you guys are going to pick. So I have
Shout out to
ask,
Sheena quick.
The Levis and Stroud visits, were those scheduled before today's presser was scheduled?
Yeah, they've been scheduled for a while, and it wouldn't have changed anything. Like, we're going through the whole process, and we're sticking to it. And we're not going to jump the gun, make any decisions. We need every.
I hate to stop this in the middle of that, but one of the things I love about Sheena, man, like, Sheena is never afraid to ask the tough question. She done it a lot during the Matt Rule era. Why did you schedule a press conference to talk so glowingly about the little old man from Alabama, but you got 2 guys in the building today? What's that about? You can tell he's uncomfortable answering this question. Because they, traditionally, I think what would happen by now is that, they probably would have already announced the pick. When you see the Vegas odds, they don't get these odds from nowhere. The Vegas odds are ridiculous right now. It's like Bryce minus 1,500 or something crazy like that. I'm not a gambler. I don't even really understand how all that works, but from the people that I hear that do, they're like, man, that means it's pretty much a lock. And it's like, I think they're just trying to keep the suspense of the moment, which I get it. It's fun. One thing I don't really like or understand, for one of the first times in a very long time, we are the story, both nationally, locally, from a content perspective. It's like, what's not to like about this, man? We get an opportunity to talk to each other, to debate each other, to yell at each other. And I do see some people sometimes that are like, man, I'm sick of this. And I get it. There's some fatigue that set in with it. But the reason why I'm so big on doing this, man, is because for 2 reasons. Number 1, we may not get this opportunity again. And number 2, I don't want this opportunity again. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be sitting at the first pick. I don't want to be in the top 10. I want to be down there where Baltimore, Kansas City, Cincinnati, LA Chargers, LA Rams were, all these different teams. Philly, I know Philly's up in the draft now because of trades or whatever like that, but I want to be down there where those teams are consistently. I don't want to be right here where we are. So I'm enjoying the moment, enjoying the suspense, talking about it, having a good time with you guys doing it. You know what I'm saying? Does it get redundant? Sure. But take a break. If this is all you do all day long, you need to reevaluate what you're doing with your time. But while we have the time, when we focus on it, man, we in it. We having a good time talking about it. Hey, it's all in good fun.
Every piece of information we can to make the most informed decision. So we're going to go through it, and it's not done. It won't be done until later this week.
This is for you, but also for starting with Scott, but also for any of you who would like to take this, you mentioned gaining clarity in this process.
Yeah.
What has become more clear having gone through this process?
It just reaffirms what you know about guys, learning new things. You know, the one thing you don't know is how they study, how they learn, how they retain. You know, you can test them, see how they process. You can just really see, you can feel the presence when they walk in the room. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're trying to understand. Who is this guy? You know, who is this guy that's going to, you know, possibly be the quarterback that leads our team? That's what we're trying to discover right now.
And what was my argument always? If you've watched my channel for long enough, 86 of you guys watching, 38 likes, smash that like button. I appreciate it so much, man. I thank y'all for being here with me on this afternoon. But what was my thing always? When me and Cody would go back and forth, and I'm sure I'm going to be on, as a matter of fact, I think he and I are going to link up together to do a film study of Anthony Richardson, which I'm pretty excited about. But like, if you go back and watch any of my lives with anyone else, or my lives on my own, or my videos talking, you know, just randomly, you know, random posts or whatever like that, what was my thing always? My guy Blunt Sports always comes in the chat and says it, trust the tape. It doesn't matter. Like, what was the gentleman's name that put up the comment? I'm gonna go back and look again and say, okay, Jeffrey. Yeah. All right. When Jeffrey talked about, I guess maybe referencing the guy's size or whatever like that, you know, that's size, weight, all those kind of things, which is 100% fair. You cannot turn on that tape, see what you see from the tape perspective. It's like the S2 test. I heard a guy, I think I'm going to invite this guy on and do a live later this week with this gentleman. But there was a gentleman on Twitter that was talking in the spaces, and he was talking about the cognition test. And he said, the cognition test is not a direct correlation to if a quarterback will be successful, but it's one piece in the process to suggest that they will be. But on the other side of that, anyone who has not scored well on the S2 cognition test, none of those guys have gone on to see consistent success in the NFL. Notice I said the word consistent. Context. I don't know that he means that none of these guys can develop, because I'd be interested to see, okay, well, if that's the case, then what was Geno Smith's score coming out of college? What was Colin Kaepernick's score? What was Rich Gannon's score? What was Brad Johnson's score winning a Super Bowl for Tampa? What was Trent Dilfer's score? I know they just started scoring these guys. Wonderlic was around back then, but the S2 wasn't, because it's a 7-year-old test. What was Brock Purdy's score? You know, what was Nick Foles' score? I'd be interested to know what any of these guys' scores were, because I don't think you can just definitively say that because this person processes at a high level now, that they can't develop given time. Now, what does time look like? At the first overall pick, sure, you're not going to give a guy 4 or 5 years. I mean, look at what Trey Lance is doing right now. You know, Trey Lance is not getting an opportunity on the field because of injury, one, but also they brought in assurance, which, not for nothing, I'm going to say this. Be prepared. I'm prepared. I want all the smoke with this one as well. I saw a comment where someone suggested that, you know, and I'm not going to say any names or anything like that, because I don't care to do that. But like, someone had suggested that if we draft Bryce and CJ ends up being the better quarterback, then I'm going to be like, man, see, we should have drafted him. Nope. Because if you follow me on my channel long enough, you know there's somebody that I've always been in support of that many of you cannot stand me being in support of for. And his name is Sam Darnold. And the reason why I was in support of Sam is because of this. The man came into the league, youngest starting quarterback ever, messy situation. Came here, he showed flashes up there a couple of times, and then came down here, showed a few flashes, and very inconsistent, extremely inconsistent. But I watched what Kyle Shanahan done with an inconsistent Matt Ryan, and they had one of the best offenses in the history of the league, and they blew it in the Super Bowl. When Sam Darnold looks out there and sees Debo, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, all these weapons, this defense, this offensive line, hey, Trey, you better beat him out in camp. That's all I'm going to say. You give him an opportunity, might be a wrap. Don't at me. But like I said, who knows what that becomes? I don't know. But the reason why I can tell you that I'm not going to be the flippant kind, because I never turned on Sam Darnold. I don't look, I'm not even looking at the chat right now because y'all probably killing me. I don't care. I've always believed that he could be successful if given the right set of circumstances, right? We saw last year, he went on a tear for us. He blew it in the Tampa game. Okay. But how did we get there? It was a mixture of both him and PJ. But he played well in the times that he was asked to play. So it's not beyond me to think that he can come in and be, solid. But that's beside the point. The point is this. If we draft Bryce, if we draft anybody else, I'm not going to be the flip-floppy guy. But to the point that Scott Fitter is making right now, like I said, when you watch the tape, when you see how this guy, when they talk about seeing how a guy prepares, you want to see if what you're seeing on the field matches up with who the kid is when you actually bring him in the building. And I think we're seeing that. Let's keep going.
Hang on, we got Joe had one. Joe,
Yeah.
Scott, Mike, David.
To add on to that,
Last five.
yeah, I would say that we go to these games and we see these players as players, right? But we don't get to know them as people. So going through this process, we get to know them as people and just kind of dig down into their core and kind of get to know who they are.
And we heard Scott talk about that process with Russell. You were out there, obviously. Reading back at some of the stuff, and you guys talked a lot about, or John did, about his long arms and big hands.
Yep.
What through that whole process with Russell will inform you guys at all on this decision with Bryce?
I think the big thing that I learned from John through that, and I think Fit would echo this, is he had conviction on Russell. So if we have conviction on a guy that we really like, no matter how big or short he is, that's not going to matter. As long as we're convicted on that guy and we feel like he's our guy, then we'll go with it.
Yeah. I'd say,
thanks, Dan.
Really, Dan's right. It's about conviction. It's about feel. It's about also compensating factors. How do guys compensate their game? How does CJ compensate his game? How's Will? How's Bryce? How do those guys change, and how does it fit what you're going to ask them to do? How does it fit your offense? How does it fit Frank's offense and Thomas's offense? And that.
Has anybody asked this question? Was this press conference necessary? Why today? Maybe they had it scheduled. When Sheena asked that question, that's what I was looking. I was looking for a follow-up question of somebody to say, why today? Like, of all days, you clearly made the point that you have had this press conference scheduled, and that you also clearly made the point that CJ and Will Levis's visits were scheduled. Why on the same day? That just makes no sense to me. What it feels like to me is this. When I'm watching them do these verbal gymnastics, it feels a lot like when they put out the video, the pro day video or whatever like that. And Josh McCown said to Will Levis, "We'll see you when we get to Charlotte." They made sure to put that in there so they could debunk the whole, we weren't calling CJ the guy automatically. Like, that's what this feels like. This feels like the confirmation of someone. And I think we all know who it is. It's pretty spelled out. It's only a couple of minutes of this left, man, and we'll chop it up after that.
That's what we're trying to figure out. Who's the best guy to run that offense?
Scott, have you made your big trade for this draft period, or is the number one pick still a possibility to be traded?
Yeah, as of right now, I don't see us trading the pick. We'll always pick up the phone. But I think we're in a position where we like where we're at. We're convicted. But just philosophically, we'll always pick up the phone and listen. But it's got to make sense.
Cole and Dan, as you guys rebuild this defensive front, what have you guys learned about this class from a front seven perspective, defensive line and linebacker, like overall?
Yeah, I think D-line linebacker, I think there's some guys that we like and that we have a lot of interest in terms of fitting in our style of defense that we're going to play. I know we want smart, tough, instinctive players, guys with height and length, and guys that can run. So I feel like there's some good fits from a D tackle, DN perspective, and then linebacker wise, there's some guys there that we like as well. So we're excited about this class.
Yeah, we're just scouting different body types for the different scheme. Not too much changes for us. It's just, we weight certain attributes differently than we did with the previous scheme.
Yeah. Scott, you mentioned in a couple of press conferences, you haven't asked Frank.
Real quick, because I think I know what the next topic is going to be, and I do want to hear what they say here because I have a guess as to who it could be. But we had a discussion when we were doing the mock draft when they talked about linebackers, and many people were like, "Man, if Jack Campbell's on the board, you got to take him." I don't know about in this defense because I think the middle linebacker in there's really technically not there are middle linebackers, kind of one on each side in a 3-4, but I don't think that he has the same instinctive role that you would have in a 4-3 with what Kuechly was doing when he, was with us. And so I don't know if Jack Campbell would necessarily be the guy. I would say more a guy like Trenton Simpson, but I don't know that he'll fall that far. But like athletic guys who may not necessarily be the most cerebral or whatever like that, but can stretch the field and, move sideline to sideline really quickly and things like that, like the super athletic guys. Like, for instance, I think Frankie Louvu, now there's been a debate on where Frankie will be, if he'll line up on the opposite side. One of the reasons that they kind of got rid of Hassan Reddick, didn't get rid of Hassan Reddick, but let Hassan Reddick walk, was because of the idea that Frankie Louvu would kind of fill in that gap. At least that's what I thought, because, when Hassan was here, there would be times where he would kind of, fill in that role on the weak outside linebacker. But like, I don't know that they'll put him on in that edge, on the edge like that. So, but I do believe that in the 3-4, him in the middle or lined up beside Brian Burns as kind of that secondary linebacker, he can wreak havoc, like absolute havoc, especially in the run game. So it'll be interesting to see what they do right there. Now, they still may bring in a guy because I don't think just because you're going 3-4 don't mean that you can't have specific, nickel and dime packages where you would play kind of a surefire middle linebacker, right? But it'll be interesting to see, what decision they make right there. But let's keep going.
Pickens. How much is that because you guys were kind of on the same page when you went into this process, and that really hasn't changed?
That's a really good question. I think we kind of saw guys the same way, but the reason I didn't want to ask him a question is I didn't want to close off our minds.
Pat Boney, yes, what's good, my brother?
Decision back in March, and I asked him just jokingly. I think it was late last week. We're sitting in his office. I said, I still haven't asked you yet, but we do. I think we do see things the same way. We value the same things in quarterbacks, the same traits, the same characteristics. There's certain things that we really want, and that's where the clarity comes from.
Gentlemen, this is for any one of you. Is there any one of those top 30 visits that really stuck out to you in these last few weeks?
Here it goes.
I don't know. We had a couple receivers in last week. I don't know if I want to say names just because names get out. There was a receiver that we had in last week that was really kind of cool to get to know him. Strong character, just a cool guy, and he's one guy that stood out for me.
I'm going to take an educated guess, and I think many of you will probably think the same thing. We share a name, Jonathan Mingo. When he came in the building, I was like, oh boy. And that's where I think the fit magic is going to come in, because Mingo to me feels like a guy that's going to get drafted high because of A.J. Brown. Because you can't watch what A.J. Brown done in Philly and with the Titans and not think that they're comps. They look very similar. They're built very similar, very similar skill sets. I could make a strong argument that Mingo is a better route runner, and you got intel, you got inside knowledge, Matt Corral, and so this guy comes in. Could it be Josh Downs? Maybe. I don't know. I'm pretty sure Josh Downs had a visit. Maybe you guys can educate me on that. But when I heard this, I immediately was like, oh, he's talking about Jonathan Mingo. Because just the proposition of having a big body target like that. And I know this wide receiver room is already filled, but you can never have enough. Never have enough with the kind of rotations. Plus, not for nothing. It's not even so much about the injuries with Chark. Like Adam Thielen's an older guy. Chark's, still young, but and obviously there's the injury thing, but rotation. I don't think Jonathan Mingo would come in immediately and just start taking jobs, but it would just be an interesting proposition to say the least. Now, if they said it was Josh Downs, if it comes out that it was Josh Downs, that would make sense too, because I don't know. I think one of the things that is a big filling need for us is the slot. Any of these guys can play the slot. Adam Thielen can play the slot. But I think if you have a smaller guy like that that's more shifty in the slot, and I know many people would be like, well, what about Shy? What about him? A lot of drops. We don't know. I mean, hey, when you get opportunity, you got to take it. So let's finish this out.
Last one from Bill. Kind of for all of you, but Cole, when you talked to your team, when you traded up to number 1, what was that conversation like, and how much did your lives kind of change in a blink of an eye a little bit, and just kind of all got kicked into high gear?
I mean, the job is still the same, right? We have to evaluate all these guys. The excitement is definitely there. Last year we had the opportunity to the top tackle on the board fell to us, so we were fired up about that. And then now we have the opportunity to take the top quarterback on our board. So, I'm fired up. I'm really excited about this opportunity, but the job doesn't change. We still got to evaluate all these guys, still got to make the rest of our picks. There's definite excitement for all the scouts, but we still have to execute and do our jobs.
Thank y'all very much.
That's it.
He does
The
it.
Bryce Young press conference is over.
He's biting his tongue right now, not to tell you.
Yeah.
All right, man. So that was pretty simple. So to me, I think that we are pretty much, it's a done deal, but let's talk about it. That's what happens when you hit the wrong button. I'm starting a new show, so don't be mad at me. Anyway, so press conference is over. I'm excited about the direction of this team just in general. I feel good about how everybody seems to be on the same page. Like it's a universal approach to greatness. And I think that that's one of the biggest first steps. Like you have to, vertically be on the same level in order to have consistent success. So I think this is the first step in us being able to have that. So I'm going to go here and answer some of you guys' questions in the chat, and then I'm going to jump out of here, man. Yeah, Ray, he is 100% shooting on the boards. 100%. I look forward to seeing what he looks like at the next level. Like I said, I think A.J. Brown is the perfect comp, so be interesting. Yeah, man, I'm hitting the wrong buttons and everything. Hopefully we'll have all the kinks worked out by draft night so we can come in here and have a more succinct show. Like I hit the button like we was out of here, bro. Oh, goodness. Let's see what y'all talking about in the chat. Brandon Cawthon, I know that you've been on the CJ Stroud train, so let's see what you got. Says, I will say this. If you go back and look at the way Reich schemes and pass blocking that opens up huge throwing lanes for his QBs, it's pretty impressive. Jackson Kruger Sports on YouTube. I agree. He schemes his quarterbacks up extremely well. This was the Bryce the Bryce introduction press conference of his introduction press conference. That's a fact. Everyone, as far as coaching fans wise, it's a tornado. Everyone, as far as coaches fan wise, it's a tornado. I think I know what you mean by that. It's a lot. It's a lot going on. This has literally split the fan base. But again, I think all of this ultimately, here's what will happen. Because I think this is still going to happen, JSU. I think what will happen is we'll draft Bryce or we'll draft CJ or whatever, which I think it'll be Bryce. But we'll draft him. People will still be. I don't think the split nature of this situation is done yet. And it could be anybody. One of the things let me tell you one of the things that sold me on Bryce. Like because I said this. You can go back on my Twitter timeline, and I'm quoted in saying this, right? I remember when Tua got flung around and, hit his head and, came up doing this or whatever. Not picking on him. I'm just being honest about what I saw, But I remember when that happened, and I remember saying on Twitter, like, man, like, because Bryce Young was eating. I mean, he was cooking, bro. I think this might have been after the Tennessee game, if I'm not mistaken. And even though they lost that game, I could just tell, like, oh, this dude's like super talented. But I remember saying to myself, like, man, football is a big man sport. And when I had in my mind when I said that, thinking about Bryce Young at the next level. And I was like, but that was before I really got a real look at what this kid does. And I'm going to tell you what ultimately sold me on him. Steve Smith. Like, when I saw, like, I watched some of Steve Smith, like when Steve Smith really first started his podcast or whatever on YouTube, he was talking about Bryce like way back then. It just wasn't as prominent as it is right now. But then when I saw how glowingly, like I was already kind of like, pro Bryce anyway. But like when I saw what he was talking about, the same things that he was talking about at the pro day is what I was watching when I would watch Bryce play, right? Not saying scouting his film or whatever like that. Like JT Barrett, I watched his video, QB school, right? And just when he was like evaluating the LSU game and he was talking about how Bryce was always finding throwing lanes, always finding people open. A lot of times these guys just weren't, dare I say, talented enough to be able to be on the same page cerebrally as him throwing them open. So there would be a lot of drops, right? And so after seeing Steve Smith talk about how when he was watching him throw the corner route, he said, man, I could have put on the cleats. I could have laced them up. I could have went out there and done that because of just how well you threw the corner route. Like it was a thing of beauty. He was like, before the guy even came out of the break, the ball was already there just in like perfect placement. And he was like, man, I would be honored to see you as the number one pick. And why did he say it like that? Because of who he was going to. I think if the Bears were still at the first pick and there was a flip-flop about the potential for him being there, I don't think Smitty talks like that. But I strongly believe the reason that Smitty said what he said and the way that he said it was because he was like, man, I would be honored for you to put on that jersey that one day, one is already retired from me, in Charlotte on Mint Street, but one day will be hanging in the rafters at Canton. I would be honored for you, kid, to wear that same jersey. I think that's what and when I heard that, I was like, oh, I'm sold. I'm sold. And I mean, he took, in my opinion, kind of an unnecessary shot at CJ Stroud because he was talking about the, processing. And it's crazy because I kind of figured that even when he said it, like when he was talking about, all this stuff, he was like, you may not be the prototypical size, but like these guys don't process like you or whatever like that. And I was thinking like, man, why are you taking a shot at CJ Stroud? And, many people were like, well, how do you know that he's doing that? Well, go back and watch his, podcast with Tom Pelissero. He said it directly. Stroud and Bryce are night and day. They're not even close. And I was like, dang, Smitty, you ain't got to do them like that. But that's what sold me. Jovan Brown said he had I watched that interview. I didn't watch the whole thing because some of it was on while the press conference was on. But I'm going to go back and watch the whole thing. Chris Shepard said, I was on CJ at first, but I'm leaning Bryce now. Watch his interview on the Pivot podcast. Yeah, man. I mean, and sometimes I will say this, Chris, and thank you for commenting. Sometimes we can be prisoners of the moment. Like sometimes we can watch because there's so much momentum building up about Bryce Young. I would dare anyone to go back. Like if we're talking about the Pivot podcast, go back and watch CJ when he was on there with Bijan Robinson. Because like I said, I made that comment and I talked about how, here's the one thing, because CJ was on there, Bryce was on there with his dad. Bryce's dad he's just top shelf, man. Like, it's one, look. Top shelf. You got a dad that's like so engaged with his son, but not like he's LeVar engaged, but not LeVar. Like he ain't trying to be the guy. You know what I'm saying? Like LeVar is engaged, but like you can tell LeVar trying to be the guy and be engaged at the same time. You know what I'm saying? It's a little different with his dad. His dad's like, look, I'm here, but I already got an established life. Like I'm here with my son. I'm here to support him. He's the only kid. You know what I'm saying? So you can really see like his dad and mom both really truly have a strong relationship. And that's why that kid was able to develop in the way that he did. And his dad was telling a story and he was talking about how he caught a ball when he was very little. Like he threw like a little plush ball at him or something like that. And he immediately just and caught it. And he was like, I knew then, like I had something different. Like I knew this kid was going to be something different. And I agree. Somebody else made a comment. I can't remember who this was. I want to say it might have been Peter Schrager, maybe Todd McShay, one of these guys was just like Bryce. No. I'm sorry. It was the guy from Crane and Company. That's who said it. He said Bryce Young was born to play quarterback. Like when you just watch him, like you can tell that this is what he does. You can look honestly. I mean, you just see it all over him, man. But I can't say that about him and not say the same thing about the other guys in this evaluation process. So I don't want to just go too super biased. I do want. I love Bryce. Look, that's who I want us to draft at quarterback. But like I said, go watch CJ's as well because CJ's situation is a lot different. CJ's dad has been in prison. CJ's dad was a pastor. CJ's dad kind of fell back into some old habits or whatever like that. And, unfortunately it landed him back in prison. And he actually had some like, ill feelings towards his pops for like, basically feeling like, yo, you abandoned me, man. Like you jumped back into your old lifestyle, you know what I'm saying, or whatever. And you basically left us. So I had to de facto become the man of the family or whatever. So for a man to be able to keep, and I do say young men, to be able to keep his head on straight like he has, be able to accumulate the kind of money. I mean, CJ was getting bread too. You know what I'm saying? NIL deal, he talked about it. He's getting bread. He was helping out his, offensive linemen and stuff like that, like giving them money, doing, all kind of things for his teammates. But like to be able to do that, and his interview was done before the season. You know what I'm saying? And to still come out and have the kind of season that he did, like I'll give you an example with CJ. We talk about his like the Georgia tape is what kind of made CJ like huge talk in this conversation of who should be number one. That's most people would agree with that. Many of you may not, but that's what most people would agree with. I would personally agree with that because what can't be overstated is look, we have seen inflated numbers from Ohio State quarterbacks over the years. It's just a fact. We've seen Alabama quarterbacks have success, high level success, but maybe not the high level numbers. When you think back about guys like AJ McCarron, Jake Coker, Greg McElroy, people like that who have won national titles, who've had success with Alabama, right? And then we see guys like Mac Jones and Tua and Jalen Hurts, and these guys have come into the league and actually been able to be consistently, good at the next level. Like I know Tua is, injured all the time, but when Tua's playing, like he's top shelf. Like you can't deny what you saw from last year from Miami's offense when he's healthy. But there's something to be said for when you watch CJ, and the reason why the Georgia tape became something that people started looking at and saying like, yo, this guy can do some things because you saw a progression of growth that can't be overstated. That's why he's in this conversation. It wasn't just that he had one good game. It's the fact that if you go and look on that chart, there's a chart that exists, right? Matter of fact, I'll show you guys this real quick. If I can, I don't know if I have that chart here. I have a different chart. I'm sorry. This is not the same chart. I meant to screenshot this, and the next live I do, I'm going to do another live before this week is over. And when I do, I'll show you this chart. But there's a chart that shows CJ's performance under pressure. And that performance under pressure is literally like he literally dropped in ranking, completion percentage under pressure to being in the Caleb Williams, Bryce Young. I'm going to tell you another guy real quick. And I talked about this with Cody from C3 Panther Podcast on Twitter. I said, man, I'm telling you, everybody's talking about Caleb Williams and all these other guys, Michael Penix Jr. If Michael Penix came out this year, there's a good chance that he might be QB1. He's that good. He was injured a lot at Indiana, but watch him at Washington and look out for him next year. But anyway, under pressure, Michael Penix was up there. As a matter of fact, he was higher than Bryce on that grid. This is a PFF grid. Bryce was like, in the 90. Let's say if Caleb Williams was on another stratosphere under pressure, like he was like the, top dog. Michael Penix was like, really close second, and Bryce was like right there in the, that third ranking or whatever like that. CJ Stroud was all the way down where Spencer Rattler was. As a matter of fact, Spencer Rattler was just a notch below him under pressure. I'm not talking about overall completion percentage. I'm talking about his completion percentage under pressure. And what he showed was progression over the season in that Georgia game, because if you look at his completion percentage under pressure in the Georgia game, night and day difference from what it was for the rest of the season. The question is this, okay, which one of these guys am I getting? Am I getting the guy that was consistently, didn't perform as well under pressure? If you go watch the Iowa game, many of you are Jack Campbell fans. Go watch that game and look how Jack Campbell was giving him all kind of trouble in that game, right? Or is it that, or am I getting the Georgia guy? And that's what the evaluation process is going to tell you more of, that you get an opportunity to see, okay, we don't know definitively. There's no way to know definitively. There's no way to know definitively with Bryce, for that matter. But at least during the evaluation process, I add in the S2, scores. I add in the combine. I add in the pro days and all these different kind of things. And I can come to the conclusion of like, okay, this is my guy based on this information. That's why I don't discount you guys that are CJ guys. I do not at all. Because when you put it all together, you see a guy that could be a franchise quarterback. When I put it all together and I see it, like many of you that believe in Bryce, I see that he could be a better one. That's just it. That's all this is. Riz Beast said Michael Penix is short too. Next year will be funny because I think he's better than Drake May. Hey man, listen. There's gonna be some guys next year. I'll tell you, like in my opinion, next year's quarterback talk is gonna be just as crazy as this year because of the teams that might end up in the position to draft one. Right? You got Michael Penix Jr. I think Caleb Williams is gonna be consensus number one. I don't even think it's gonna be close. With him, I would be a little concerned, like right in the FU to, Utah, or whatever, and they got smoked in that game on his hands. I'm like, I don't know if I do that kind of stuff. But, excuse me, outside of that, this dude's legit. But him, Quinn Ewers, who I'd love to see what Quinn Ewers does, especially now that you got the fire lit under you. You got Arch Manning in the building. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think they got another guy behind him. So it'll be interesting to see what Quinn looks like next year. Obviously, Drake May, that goes without question. Like I said, Michael Penix, Joe Milton, the kid at Tennessee. Many are saying that's the next, version of AR. So here's the thing. It's a copycat league. So suppose that AR gets drafted by, let's say, Indianapolis. Let's say that Shane Steichen grabs AR and, turns him into a, version of what you could see develop eventually to, Jalen Hurts or, in that kind of realm. Joe Milton's going to fly off the draft board because of that, because many people are going to be trying to replicate it. So, that's another guy that I, be taking a look at for next year as well. So it'll be very interesting. Hey, Claire, Aries, what's going on? Let's see what you said here. Said it's easier times for us as human beings to lean towards the individual that has the most relatable background in comparison to our reality. We naturally want to have someone to root for. I completely agree. 100%. I think it is very, very much when CJ, both of these guys, both of these kids, these young men come off as very relatable guys. That's one thing I will say about them. Like, that's the one thing that people knock about Will Levis. Like, Will Levis does too much weird stuff. But not for nothing, I think that when you look at his body of work at Kentucky, he also has erratic film, extremely erratic film. I'll just say this about him, and this is why I've been careful with my words, because I don't want them to come back and bite me. I'm not, the last thing I would want is for Will Levis to fall into a situation in this division and everything that I said come back to bite me. Pause. And I'm dead serious. Will Levis fall into Atlanta where he don't have to play right away. He can just sit back and learn, or fall into Tampa where he don't have to play right away. It's not that this guy doesn't have talent. It's you wonder if what's up here matches what he can do, here. Because some of the decision-making is just crazy. It's not even so much the on-field decision-making, because that you can't walk away, and many of you may not agree with this. I know my boy Big Jordan gonna completely disagree with me on this, and that's okay. You can't walk away from watching Will Levis's tape and come away and think that AR can develop and Will Levis can't. The situations were extremely similar. They had no help. Zero. I'm talking about every time the ball was snapped, the opposing defense was in Will Levis's lap. Pause. So, hey, look, like I said, I'm not a Levis guy. I don't want him. You can keep it. I do not want him. He's not somebody that I want in Carolina. But I think we are kidding ourselves to think that this guy couldn't fall into the right situation. Key point. Right situation. Number 1 pick is not the right situation. Number 4 pick may not be the right situation. But it's not beyond me to think that he can't fall into the right situation. Let's say he falls all the way down the draft board and lands in, I don't know, Baltimore and backs up Lamar for a couple of years. You know, or suppose he falls to Pittsburgh, becomes the next iteration of Ben. You know, if Kenny Pickett don't work out, you know, I just don't want him in the South. For that matter, I don't want AR in the South. For that matter, I don't want Hendon Hooker in the South. Like, I'm not afraid of any of them, man. I want to smoke with everybody because I'm one of those people that believes. Like, I thought about the coolest thing today as I was preparing for this live. I was like, yo, what if all the noise about CJ is true and he ends up falling to Atlanta? And it's California high school all over again. CJ versus Bryce, Bryce versus CJ for the next 4 years, maybe longer. 4 to 5 years, hopefully 10 years longer. I'm going to tell you, personally, I'm here for it. I would love it. I'm not afraid about any of these teams becoming better because I think when these teams are better, the teams that have better teams in the division typically do better. So, but thank you for weighing in, Aries Claire. Shout out to the 704 Charlotte Bound podcast. Those are my guys over there. Why Big Jordan? That's my guy. Hey, Jay Wright, I agree. My man, picture muscles, all of that. It's crazy. Man, I'm having to catch up. CJ to Atlanta. I ain't gonna say that, bro. Because I'm gonna tell you, if my man struggle under pressure, here's one thing I think. I had some, you know, I said some stuff about I made a comparison one time that didn't go well on Twitter at all. As a matter of fact, I had to come out and apologize personally. I didn't feel like, I'm going to say apology is the wrong word. I didn't apologize. I just clarified my statement when I was talking about Hassan Reddick and Brian Burns. And, you know, I posted that tweet where I said Hassan might be better than ... never mind. And it caused the uproar. And I got all kind of people after me, including his brother. And I apologize for that. And I didn't it wasn't my intention, you know, to try to cause any confusion, but I was just stating something I saw at the time. It's the NFC Championship, as a matter of fact. And Hassan Reddick was going crazy. I mean, he was unblockable. I think in this defense, we will have a similar effect with Brian. And so I wouldn't necessarily be worried about somebody like CJ because he ain't getting away from nobody. I mean, he's shown that he can, you know, I guess. But I think Brian Burns is going to wreak havoc this year in a 3-4 because that's always been his natural position. He's a 3-4 outside linebacker. They tried to beef him up to make him a defensive end. He's not big enough. He's not. Go look at some of the historical defensive ends that have played for the Carolina Panthers. I ain't even talking about like historically throughout the league. Like Brian Burns ain't built like Myles Garrett. You know what I'm saying? So like, let's take the league out of it. Go look at Charles Johnson. You know what I'm saying? Chris Jenkins. I mean, he was a tackle, but you know, some of these guys have been humongous. Like he's not built like that. Like he can put on muscle, but it's not gonna. He doesn't have a full frame that's built like that, right? He has a frame to be the Von Miller. He has a frame to be Khalil Mack. He's a 3-4 outside linebacker, and now that they finally got a defense that fits his skill set, I think he's gonna eat. That's just my take. Bruh. JP, it was crazy. It was crazy. I'm talking about, but what made it so crazy was just how many people were like in agreement. And like I said, I didn't mean to. It wasn't my intention to start like some issue or whatever like that. But it was wild, man. But hey, look, if you know me, JP, you've been on my show for long enough. You've been a mod for long enough. I don't duck no smoke, bruh. None. So, but it wasn't. I mean, that wasn't even the. It wasn't even like that. So I think it was just taken out of context. And well, maybe not. Maybe it was taken out as it was supposed to be taken. But I didn't mean anything by it. It wasn't malicious. I'll just say that. But like I said, I ain't afraid of no smoke either. Everything's just all erratic right now, man. My show looks ridiculous. Big Bubba Chuck, Big Money, the Kraken was ready to take over the league and Greg had to leave. Yeah, man. Listen. That's what I'm saying. Like, but I feel like now, let me tell you, I would not be shocked if Brian Burns had 20 sacks this year. I know that sounds crazy when you consider the numbers that have been, but when you look at the defense that's available to him now, it wouldn't shock me. Not a bit. Would not shock me in the slightest. Yeah, he really did. And it's funny because I saw a lot of people, the Jahmyr Gibbs conversation, I saw a lot of people suggesting that he should be the pick at 39. And I'm like, really? I don't know about that. I mean, the familiarity, I guess, from that perspective. But, like, I don't know if I'm, nah. That's too high for me. I just don't. I don't know. Chris Hopkins said AR-15. Hey, I feel you, dog. My man Kaseko 2 times, a.k.a. Big Spence, said, I'm completely 50-50. I understand. This is not going to be an easy decision because there is going to be, like I said, when we make the decision, though, I can guarantee you this. Once the decision is made, there are still going to be people that are like, yo, why did we draft this person? Or why did we draft that person? Right? I don't think that a lot of these things are going to change until we get to training camp and you see Bryce Young dotting up this defense. That's when I think people that are on the other side, I always believe this about politics. Follow me for a second. You're always going to have your extremely far right people and you're going to have your extremely far left people. I think the people that are in the middle, regardless of where you traditionally vote, suppose you vote Democrat, Republican, whatever, it's those independent people in the middle, not where you vote, where you're registered is what I meant to say. It's those people in the middle that you got to convince. And I think that's where a lot of people are going to be up until the point when we get to training camp and they see him throw the ball. Like, I think there's still going to be people that are like, man, we drafted the wrong guy. I don't know about this. But I'm telling you, when you see him in camp and you see him the first preseason game, and he's shredding up these defenses already without even really having any major installs at this point, I think that's when people will be like, all right, yeah. Because I'm telling you, I believe that Bryce, one of the things, like, look, S2 cognition. I think part of the reason why S2 cognition is so important is because it lets you evaluate not just how much you can process, but how fast you can play. And I think there is a good probability that Bryce Young will play much faster. I ain't talking about jumping around in the pocket, scooting around everywhere like that. Like, sure, he can do that kind of stuff, and he's good at that. But I think there's a potential for him to play even faster at the next level, which would be scary. Because I don't know about you guys, but I watched a guy that wore number 9 down south, down Creole, for a number of years carve us up in the middle of the field, especially on second and short, third and long. stuff like that convert not just to us, but to the league. And I'm not saying that he's that guy, but what I am saying is this. When you process fast like that, you see things quicker than other people can react to them. And you can see things beforehand. So it's possible he could play even faster at the next level. Don't know. It's possible that CJ could do that too. But I think the thing that you see with CJ that makes it a little more concerning, if you will, is the idea that the processing, if there's already a developmental arc that exists there, that it might take a while to get up to speed because it's going to be about 10-15% faster, and like I said, the Georgia tape kind of shows you a little bit of what you could see potentially him grow into from that point. So go through a few more of these comments. Yeah, I completely agree, Josh. I agree 100%. 100%. I think because it's hard. You can't ignore it. You can really weigh in size and frame and all that kind of stuff. You can't ignore IQ. You can't ignore tape. You can when you look at the cumulative process, you can't ignore all of that. It's impossible to. I disagree. Drew became who he was in New Orleans, but Drew was already partly that before he got there. Go back and watch Drew in San Diego. If I'm not mistaken, they were a playoff team one of those years. That's why it was such a shock that they would move on from him after injury. Drew didn't leave with like horrible stats, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I don't have it pulled up right now, but from my remembrance, and you can help me with that. But yeah, of course, he got to Sean Payton, and he got better, but he didn't leave on, super horrible terms. Here's another thing, and I'm not giving New Orleans no credit, but like, I'm going to tell you one thing I'm glad that didn't happen in New Orleans. And this is another reason why I'm, big on Bryce, but also big on one of the reasons I'm so, when Scott Fitter talked about a receiver that he saw that he was very intrigued with on the top 30 visits. One of the reasons I was so excited to hear that is this. I talked about this with Patrick Mahomes. I hope, for Patrick's sake, and I hope let's just say hypothetically, the trajectory for the NFL for Bryce Young is to have a similar kind of success that Patrick Mahomes has. I'm being optimistic here, right? Follow me. If he has that kind of success, inevitably, two things are going to happen. He's going to be able to do it with guys that are subpar, if you will. If you want to say in the realm, look, nobody that plays in the NFL is a scrub. Let's just go ahead and debunk that right now. Because sometimes people will throw out little comments. I thought the funniest thing that happened on that panel was one of the guys. I think it might have been one of the guys from 4-Man Rush. And shout out to those guys. So I'm not picking on you. I'm just talking about what happened when we were on the live. But one of them said something to the effect of, man, I could throw a 4-yard out or something like that. And Cody was like, no, you can't. And the whole panel erupted. Because it's true, man. Like, none of these guys in the NFL are scrubs. You know what I'm saying? Like, most of the dudes in the NFL would be Mr. Football in their state. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, these dudes ain't no scrubs, right? So, but what I will say is obviously there's levels. There's a different level. Patrick Mahomes was able to win a Super Bowl with, yes, a dominant tight end, but he didn't have any real, hard, what most people would consider, top tier perimeter weapons, especially after Tyreek left. So if you were able to do that without him, here's the thing that I'm looking for, because you have Andy Reid and you have an offensive minded, front office. I'm telling you, eventually his 2007 Tom Brady season is coming. It's coming. Because one of these big name receivers is going to find their way to Kansas City to go play for them. Sort of like Randy did in 2007 with Tom Brady, and he's going to put up numbers that are unbelievable. And my guess is it's going to be Justin Jefferson. I think Jefferson's going to find his way out of Minnesota and his way up to Kansas City. Now, that could flip. We could have a guy here that a lot of these guys may look at and be like, yo, I'm going to play with Bryce, dog. Like, get me in Carolina. That's what I want. I'm looking forward to that. Because like I said, Pat is due that. Drew never got that. All of their weapons were homegrown. Marcus Colston, what's my man? Michael Thomas, Jimmy Graham, You know, he never had the opportunity to go get like, you know, imagine AJ or Calvin or, you know, one of these big name receivers that were around during that time making their way down to New Orleans. Because the one time Drew did have that when they went out and got bigger name guys to come down and fill positions, Darren Sharper with 7 interceptions that year, they won the Super Bowl. And they never got back again. So like, there's something to be said for when, you know, you can do it without the, you know, big time, big level weapons. And I hope that if what we're projecting, if what we see from Bryce right now projects to be that, where he doesn't, with the Adam Thielen, with the DJ Chark, with the, you know, year 1, year 2, you know, maybe we get in the playoffs and the next year we're a like big time contender, or maybe even the first year, who knows? Then eventually you're going to have one of these big name guys out here who might want to come down to Carolina and play, sort of like Stephon Diggs went to, you know, to Buffalo. You never know. Never know how that works out. So it'll be interesting to watch. Don J, he didn't put it out. See, that's the one thing about the S2 score that is so interesting. There's only a few people. Well, obviously the people that, you know, took the measure of the score know this, but the reason why it's become such an issue or such a thing is because really it's up to the person who tested to put the information out. You know, like it was mentioned that Joe Burrow actually put his score out there, you know, and a lot of it with Joe Burrow is because, you know, similar to, you know, like say Cam Newton, for example, Joe Burrow only had 1 year to go off of, one exceptional year, but he had 1 year of like complete greatness to go off of. Now, Cam had some moments at Florida. Cam obviously won a junior college national championship, but Joe didn't have as good a success at Ohio State, didn't start, went to LSU, didn't have as good a year the year before, and then had a great year the year after. And then there was questions about his hand size and things like that. So like he put that score out there just to further confirm what he was as a quarterback. So like CJ didn't put his score out there because this, you have to make this known. It's not something that, you know, I think there's like a consent, you know, that they have to give in order for this score to be out there. So Bryce put his out there, which, you know, good for Bryce because Bryce had the highest score. If I'm not mistaken, he had the highest score ever. Of the scorer's history, Bryce had the highest score ever. And so, yeah, I would definitely put that out there. So I don't know that we'll ever know what what CJ's score was, because I don't think he ever released that information. So, and I'll say this to that. And then this is the last thing I'm going to answer. I'm probably going to jump off after this. But to that, I would say this. If you went back, let me ask you a question, and you answer this question for me. I saw a grid that talked about, there was like, I think it was the 2012 draft. May have been 2011, 2012. No, it was a 2011 draft, actually. Yeah, because I think the thing about that draft that was so significant was the fact that Cam Newton's name was not on it. But anyway, Richard Sherman was ranked as one of the highest players in that draft class, right? Owen, I will ask you a question if you're still in the chat. Where would you, knowing what you know today, draft Richard Sherman if he was available and he was in this draft? Where would you draft him? He don't have to be the only person to answer this question. Y'all can too. That's the question. If Richard Sherman were drafted in this draft, where would you draft him? And I'll wait for Owen's response. Or if any of you want to respond to it, you can as well, if Owen is still in the chat. All right. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Seeker, what up? 4, 3, 2, 1. So he didn't answer, so I'll go with J Issues. Top 5. With that being said, and you know what you know now, then no player that we draft, if you have a high enough grade on him and he projects to be what you want him to be for your system, is too high to draft. So when he mentioned drafting a tight end at 39 is a waste of time. Why Big Jordan said 5. Okay, there's Owen. Top 5, probably 3. Then if you think Darnell Washington is going to fit your system better than any other tight end, or, you know, Owen Papo at linebacker, or Drew Sanders at linebacker, or, you know, Jahmyr Gibbs at running back, regardless of what you or I think, there's no pick that he's too high to be drafted. So that's why I've never been the guy that, you know, because that's one of the debates that we had during the draft. Man, is that too high to grab this? Heck no. If you project him to be that guy, to be the guy that you know can develop into the guy that you need for your specific system, there is no pick too high for him. Not at all. Aaron Holt said 39 if he's available. Richard Sherman said, Seeker said number 39. Hey, it wouldn't be too high. Now, for that matter, where was Richard Sherman drafted? He was drafted in the 5th round. Why? Because he played a mix of wide receiver and corner in college at Stanford. So there really was no projection for him. You know, sort of like, you know, I think one of the guys that was probably overdrafted, that here's a great example, in my opinion, of a guy that, now, you still have to account for how you're developed. But I think Ryan Tannehill is a great example of a guy that was probably drafted too high, that if he fell to the right situation, could have probably had a more successful career. Because Ryan Tannehill, I think in that 2012 draft, was drafted number 10. Somebody help me out, to Miami. And Ryan Tannehill spent time as a receiver at Texas A&M and then transferred to, you know, quarterback. And I think that if he fell to a more favorable situation, like he did at Tennessee eventually, I do believe that he probably would have had a better career. And yes, Brandon, I agree. I think that, any quarterback is going to have a successful tight end. I don't know. I did a video on Darnell Washington. I don't know if Darnell is, I'll say this. To me, Darnell Washington, if he develops hands, can be Gronk-like. Will he be Gronk? Man, nobody's going to be Gronk, man. Like, personally, even with Greg Olsen, I love Greg Olsen. You guys know, like, Greg Olsen is, I mean, he is Carolina royalty. Gronk's best tight end ever, in my opinion. I don't even think it's close. That's just my opinion. I mean, if you want to say Travis Kelce, if you want to say, I'm not going to argue you if you say Travis Kelce. I wouldn't argue if you said Gonzalez or Sharp. I just personally believe it's Gronk. That's just me. But it's possible. Like, Darnell Washington is an athletic freak. Like, he ran a 4.6 40. He's super fast for his size. He's got range. And the thing that I love about him the most is, like I said, when you're talking about like run sets and things like that, especially creating passing lanes, his pass and run blocking ability could make him like essentially an extra offensive lineman on the field. And he's super strong. Now, if you can develop that into someone just, consistent enough, then yeah, that could be interesting. But I wouldn't be surprised that if they, because familiarity is a thing too. Like Hayden Hurst is going to be solid for us as a pass catching tight end. But it wouldn't surprise me if they take a flyer, in the later round on Cameron Latu, from Alabama. Put him back with Bryce and see how that fares. They had a pretty good, connection last year. JSU said, what about Sauce? I am unfamiliar with Sauce. You got to put me up to speed on him, bro. I'll definitely take a look at him. We'll talk about him next time. Oh, my gosh. All right, here we go. Where's that comment? I saw it. There it is. Here we go. I will always support my Carolina Panthers, but I will never support a walking IRQB in Bryce Young. Help me out, Chris and Athena. What evidence do you have to support that he will be a walking injury quarterback based on college? If you can answer that for me and debunk that for me based on college tape, you won. But I got a ton of evidence. And if Tua, let me go ahead and say this. If Tua is the answer, I got a ton of evidence to suggest that Tua showed that he would be injury prone before he was drafted. But I understand your concerns. Yes, I like Jack Campbell. I do like Jack Campbell a lot. I do wonder this though. With Jack Campbell, I wonder, like I said earlier, if he's the right linebacker for a 3-4. I think he's better 4-3 suited. Now, he may come out of a 3-4, but I think that he would probably fit better as a 4-3 middle linebacker where he's able to control more, you know. Yes. I would be, listen, man, I'm trying my hardest. I really am. I'm trying my hardest to bridle my expectations because I don't want to be upset. I don't want that to happen. I don't want to be in a position where I'm like expecting. I don't think it would just be me though. I think the consensus that there's going to be a group of people that would be so excited that, you know, they lose control. But like, because I think when the consensus says that it's one way and they go a different direction, yeah, I would be very much. I can't even explain right now. I'd be shocked. Shocked would be just watch. Look, I'm doing the draft party the night of draft show, so watch the draft show and you'll see. Okay. See, Chris, and the thing, this is what I'm talking about, man. Like, I understand, like, Tua, Kyle, and Russell. I get it because they're small. Russell didn't really have an injury-plagued career. And then I'm going to go to the next comment here because I believe this is a fallacy. Russell won because of God, their defense, and beast mode. Well, I'll speak to the first point. I don't think that God cares about the outcome of a football game. I'll say that. The gospel can be spread in win and loss. Jesus told us that there will always be the poor among us, right? So it doesn't really matter what God says in this situation. 2, what was the Legion of Boom 2 years in a row before Russell got there? 7-9 and 7-9. And he gets there and they're 11-5, and then they go 13-3 and win the Super Bowl. And then they get back to the Super Bowl. And go watch the magic that Russell Wilson put on when he threw that dart down the field, the middle of the field on that post pattern to, what's my guy, Jermaine Kearse, to beat Green Bay in a game that they should have won. I'll say that. They should have won that game. But Russell Wilson was what put them in position to win that game. As a matter of fact, Russell Wilson was what put them in position to win the Super Bowl, and then Russell Wilson ultimately lost the Super Bowl with a bad play call. But do remember, beast mode, yeah. Beast mode was running from like the 20-yard line to get them up to the goal line, but Russell Wilson threw another dart down the sideline to beast mode to put them in position to be where they were in the first place. So this idea that the Legion of Boom, plus the Legion, this is one thing I never liked about that Super Bowl where Russell lost. Man, they were up in that Super Bowl, and the Legion of Boom got carved by Tom Brady in the second half. Carved up. And they never get heat for it. It's always Russell because he's an easy target. It's always him. They never get heat for getting carved up by Brady in that second half. Just my take. Okay, God tier defense, I got you. I'm not going to say I'm going to be pissed off, Riz, but it would be. Here's the reason. Let me just tell you why with Bryce, man. I said this. If my man Anthony is still in the chat, I don't. He's not because he'd have been commenting by now. But like, here's the reason. With Bryce, I have FOMO. I don't have that with any of these other guys. If these other guys turn out great, good for them. You know what I'm saying? Like, for some reason with Bryce Young, though, I have fear of missing out. Because I think that we can get a quarterback that can be really good with CJ. I think we can get a quarterback that can be really, really good with Anthony Richardson or with Will Levis or any of these other guys that they're looking at, right? But I think we have a chance to get something that's beyond special with Bryce Young. So, yeah, I do have FOMO. If we don't draft him, I do have a fear that's like, you know, because for everything that everybody says, right? Like, oh, he's too small. Oh, he'll get hurt. My question is, what if he doesn't? If what we saw at Alabama is the projection, if he doesn't get hurt, if he does stay upright, we will have a guy. There's not a year, just like the LSU game. Many people were saying, oh, man, look at what happened against LSU. The only reason they're in that game is because of Bryce Young. Because you can make that same argument for Auburn. And now I will say this: Bryce Young made a play in the in the red zone, where he threw the ball, like the arm angle was crazy. He threw the ball around a defender and threw an interception in the red zone in the LSU game. If you want to make an argument if that's the reason they lost it, I'm not going to argue with you on that because the game comes down to inches. I get that. But I can make that same argument with him in the – I'm sorry, somebody text me. I can make that same argument in the Auburn game where he led them to victory in that game, right? I did see him lose against Georgia, but I've said this. What would happen if Georgia had an opportunity to have tape on CJ, now that they got the scouting report, and play him twice? How would that work out? You never know. It could go either way. It could, if he has JSN, then maybe they smoke Georgia, you know? So, but then again, if they take away that, on the scouting report, they take away that that evading ability inside the pocket, they may get smoked, just like Bryce did the second time. But in the SEC championship, I saw him hang 421 on that Georgia defense. Let me name a few names on that Georgia defense. Jalen Carter. He'll be a first-round pick this year. Jordan Davis. Isn't he like 6'7", 6'5", 6'6", something like that? Travon Walker, wasn't he the first overall pick? Nolan Smith. He's going to get drafted this year. Nakobe Dean. There's a lot of guys on that defense. A lot of guys. And I can tell you, even in the national championship game, getting beat like they did, Bryce still played decent. So, not giving him an excuse. No excuses. But like I said, if I'm looking at how it projects from one to the other, man, it would be hard for me to not. Yeah, I don't even want to think about that right now. It's Bryce, man. Look, that's it. I'm just saying it's Bryce. I don't care what y'all say. I'm getting ready to get out of here, but I did want to talk about two things really quick, unshow related. One was, I want to get y'all's take on this, man, because I'm seeing right now that there's breaking news that Draymond Green is likely to be suspended for stomping on Sabonis last night. What do y'all think about that? I got to tell you, man, as a teammate, Draymond, one of them people like you just love to hate, man. Like if you're a teammate of his, you love it, unless you're Jordan Poole. If you're not a teammate, you hate it. But he's just one of those people that would just drive me nuts, man. Because like at some point you just want to be like, fam, just chill out. But yeah, that's crazy. But I tell you this though, if they get rid of him, it's over. Like they getting bounced in the first round by Sacramento. Man, how the times have changed. It's crazy. I'm a Lakers fan, man. We used to smoke Sacramento. We didn't smoke them back in the day, but like, you know, we tore their franchise apart so bad they hadn't been in the playoffs for a number of years just because of how they kept trying to keep up with LA and every other team in the West. But anyway, the other thing, man, before I get out of here is many of you know I am a firm, open, and very glad about my faith believer in Jesus Christ. And man, one of our matriarchs passed away today, man, and Charles Stanley. I saw that, and I just want to give my condolences to his family. You know, just seeing, I mean, years after years after years of service, you know, to the Lord, man, which was amazing. And definitely want to pay my respects to him. You know, I said on Twitter, I can remember when I was young and my grandmother, you know, who was very sick, you know, with heart issues and couldn't really get out and go to church a lot, whatever. And some of those Sundays when I was at home with her and even during the week, you know, she spent, you know, watching In Touch with Charles Stanley and just always, you know, keeping me, you know, reminding me like, hey, John, never lose faith. You know, always keep your faith or whatever. And so definitely want to send my condolences to his family. But, man, I can't wait. You know, none of us want to leave this place sooner than we have to. But I will tell you this, man, to go to a place where you know that there's no longer going to be any pain, any suffering, you know, for eternity and get to, you know, be with your creator for eternity, man. It's just amazing. But anyway, I appreciate y'all, man. I've had a really good time, man. It's been an excellent show. Look forward to coming back and seeing y'all again soon. Man, I hope y'all like the new show format. I started, you know, for the longest time I used StreamYard, and, you know, there was some more control I wanted to have over the show and be able to, you know, have a little bit better quality level. So I hope that it was pleasing to you guys today. And I'll be back again soon live, and then we're preparing for our show that we'll be doing. I'll be joined by my new co-host, Sakib Ahmed. He'll be with me on draft night, so I look forward to that. And we may have a few surprises on draft night as well, a couple of giveaways and things like that. So, yeah, man, look forward to seeing you guys again soon, man. Shout out to everybody who showed up in the chat. Shout out to the super chats and all the likes, man. We always appreciate that very much, man. But, hey, we're 9 days away. 9 days. Yep, 9 for a reason. Y'all know it. From the draft. And until then, man, stay safe. Keep God in your heart. Keep pounding.